tuning in. Taken from the book Ouija Gone Wild by Rosemary Ellen Guiley, tonight's story is about a man that was plagued by a demon for over 25 years. Darren is a Midwest researcher who's conducted hundreds of board sessions since he became interested in Ouija boards in the mid-80s. Soon after he began using the board, his interests led him straight to Zozo, and then to near ruin. Darren's fascination started as a teenager when he and a group of friends discovered a double-sided Ouija board, along with several jars containing the preserved remains of blackbirds that had been hidden away beneath a house in Oklahoma. Whoever had used the board had employed it in magical rituals, and the dead blackbirds were a telltale evidence of sacrifice. The board itself was a mystery. It had been carefully handcrafted. On one side was done in the familiar commercial Ouija design, but the other bore something else. It was darker, and it had the word Zozo etched at the top of the board, where the word Ouija would normally be placed. There were several magical symbols etched into the middle of the board. Candle wax had been dripped on this side to create a web-like effect. Darren and his friends surmised that the board once belonged to someone who had been a practitioner of black magic, and he said when they looked at it, it gave them a bad feeling. They felt as though that side of the board was evil. But despite the group's misgivings, it was not evil enough to deter them from using the other side of the board. Soon they found that something seemed to be dissatisfied with its decision. Repeatedly, the planchette moved off the board on its own, and the board crashed to the floor. But every time it landed, it would land dark side up, almost inviting them to play. Then, the entity that they contacted when the board flew off the table identified itself as Zozo, and they felt as though they were being taunted when it spelled out, "See you on the other side." After this, they stopped playing for a while, until the temptation became too great, and they used the dark side of the board. Not only did they begin using the dark side of the board, but they would also provoke the spirits to get a reaction. Often the spirits' reply would become so violent that they started having to tape the board down to the table just to stop it from moving around on its own. As Darren grew older, he kept using the dark side of the board, but eventually his friends became so frightened he decided it would be best to hide it away and not even keep it at his house anymore. He said he put it in the back of an abandoned car in the woods outside of Jennings in Oklahoma. Several months later, he returned to those same woods to check on it, but when he pried open the rusty trunk, dozens of rats jumped out at him. "I freaked out," said Darren. "The board had been devoured by the rats, and they'd made it part of their nest." But the demise of the Zozo board didn't end Darren's fascination with the Ouija. He turned to other boards, but whenever he used one, no matter which board he tried, Zozo was always eager to make its presence known. It seemed to be very proud of its name, continuously repeating it, and even using it in third person, Darren said. The board often spelled out messages referring to mirror reflections, and told Darren and his friends to stare into pools of water. "Look for me, and you will find me," it said. Strange, cryptic messages, such as "I am everywhere" and "I am nowhere," were also common. Whatever it was, it exhibited a sharp intelligence. It was articulate, and it seemed to have precognitive abilities. You got the feeling it could sense what question would be asked next, and in doing so, it typically attempted to lead and direct the conversation. The more time he spent with the board, the more Zozo would make itself known, as though it were gathering strength through communicating with Darren. It referred to itself as a collector of souls, a great one, and the King of Kings. Sometimes Darren opened a session by asking to speak with spirits of the dead. And other communicators, initially, did seem to respond, until Zozo identified itself as being the actual communicator in disguise all along. It dominated all of Darren's sessions. It was more prominent and aggressive than any other communicator encountered by Darren and his friends. Once I asked it if it could possess a small dog in front of several onlookers, Darren said, and the dog began to shake uncontrollably. It then proceeded to attack me in front of everyone. I defended myself as the dog leapt at me, but then it attacked itself and reacted in a bizarre manner that horrified everyone there, causing the witnesses to bolt out of the door. Even more chilling than this were the entity's death predictions. Darren said that the demon accurately predicted the death of both of my long-standing best friends who were involved in these sessions. The first death remains an unsolved homicide case, in which Zozo spelled out murder when asked how my friend would die. The other friend was told he would die in a car crash, at night, all alone, by the board. Less than a year after that prediction, my dearest friend died exactly as prophesied, by wrecking his SUV late at one night. He died before the paramedics made it to the scene, alone. Darren also said he heard disembodied laughter. A girlfriend and I both heard maniacal laughter emanating from the thin air one evening. It was directly in front of our faces, which really shook us up. Later that night we had fallen asleep, and we were both awakened by something trying to choke us. Years passed, and Zozo became part of the backdrop of Darren's life. Manifestations of the entity's power were mind-boggling still, and he said anytime he used the board, it was still attached to any board that he touched, including homemade ones, as if it was waiting for him. He said I suffered extreme withdrawal from society. My social life spiraled out of control, and I developed a really extreme panic disorder. On several occasions I found myself in various emergency rooms across the country. I lost many jobs, and my marriage failed. I often refrained from using the board after numerous paranormal events, but I couldn't stop my curious fascination. It was as if Zozo was drawing me back. I would promise myself not to ever touch a board again, only to get back on time and time again, just to see if Zozo was there. I experienced poltergeist activity in home after home for many years, even after I stopped using the boards. Darren's life started to unravel. In the mid-90s, I suffered a nervous breakdown because of his influence, he said. I showed up on my mother's doorstep, a shaken, broken man. I had hallucinations that demons in human form were following me. My mother, who was a graduate of Bible college, began an impromptu exorcism and told me that doing it she witnessed dark shadows flying around me as if they were swarming around my body. She told me I fell unconscious, and after the session I slept for 18 hours. I have barely any recollection of her hands-on healing, but I awakened in a different state of mind. Where there was panic, I now felt peace and comfort, knowing her faith had caused the negativity to cease. Darren's relief, however, was temporary, as he crept back to using the board, unable to stay away, until an incident involving his daughter shook him to his very core. I hope you're enjoying tonight's story so far. Let me know your creepy Ouija board encounters in the comments below. I've also started a Patreon now, where you can listen to the podcast ad-free and get access to exclusive perks, like a free bonus episode every month and a shout out on the show. One night when he was using the board, Zozo said it would eat my daughter's soul, Darren said. It claimed it would give her an iron tongue, and then less than 2 days after that revelation, my oldest daughter was quarantined in a local hospital with a rare flesh-eating bacteria that made her tongue hang grotesquely from her mouth. I suspected spiritual foul play immediately because he was now threatening my family members, and that was just more than I could handle. Fortunately, my daughter fully recovered from a sudden illness, and after that I quit using the board. But even when I wasn't using it, paranormal events continued to happen on and off for years and years. It was as though the door that I unlocked couldn't be completely closed. In 2008, Darren undertook research on Zozo with the intention of writing a book about his experiences, but his focus on the demon led to an increase in poltergeist activity around his home. He said the most terrifying event occurred in a house on Hudson Avenue. He said at the top of a very narrow flight of stairs, I heard my then 1-year-old daughter scream as if she was in pain. I rushed out of an upstairs bedroom and saw her whisked away by unseen hands, being pulled through the air. By the time I ran down the stairs, she was down another flight of steep stairs. I found her in a state of shock in the basement. And that night I was awakened by the sound of a large framed picture of Jesus swaying violently on the wall of my bedroom, which was also in the basement of this creepy old house. I had to physically restrain the picture from swaying, and after careful examination, I saw that all the nails holding it up were completely intact. I called the landlord and asked her if she knew the house was haunted, and she did say the previous tenants departed in haste, leaving behind all their personal belongings, which had remained there when I took over the house. She explained she had purchased the home from a couple whose 3 children had advanced forms of mental illness. So I left the house as they had, in a hurry. After this, Darren stopped working on his book, trying to break the connection to the demon that was plaguing him. But he has an uneasy certainty that regardless of what he does, Zozo always knows how to get its way back into his life. He thinks the entity does the same with others who first make contact with it through the board, and he believes it's followed him around for many years from place to place, and without even having a single Ouija board around me. I've been able to cleanse it with the help of my minister, but at times I sense that it comes back. In late 2011, after a long abstinence, Darren got back on a board, but was relieved to find Zozo absent, now for the first time in 25 years of using the board. However, soon after this, Darren said his 3-year-old daughter began drawing the letter Z all by herself, fascinated with the shape. He said he resists the urge to participate in Ouija sessions out of fear that it could attack her in a similar way to what had happened to her big sister. But these terrifying experiences have left lingering scars, and talking about his past is difficult for Darren. I've received hundreds of emails with regards to Zozo, Darren said. I've corresponded with people from many countries who claim they have had their own encounters. Tales pouring from dozens of countries including Canada, Mexico, the UK, Brazil and Australia. My public site meter has logged page views from government agencies everywhere from Russia to the USA and Israel, as well as lower ranking military jurisdictions. 23% of all hits to the site originate from an unknown IP address, which park on the site for unusually long periods of time. He cautions others that Zozo is a patient and cunning entity who doesn't always make itself immediately known, and what begins as seemingly innocent and intriguing communication with benign spirits can quickly turn deeply personal, offensive and evil. I believe his purpose is to confuse, oppress and dominate people, said Darren. He always made sexual remarks about any women who were present for the session. It seemed to just know things about people in the room and wouldn't hesitate to give private information out about them. It would even reveal when a particular woman was on a menstrual cycle. People who develop continued communication with the demon are often tricked into believing that it can grant special powers to them, he continued. It thrives on repeated contact and can maintain elaborate conversations. It can quickly identify a person's weakness and use its sharp wit to gain influence over the victim. And the experiences seem to have a pattern of using fear as a motivator in whatever agenda the entity has in store. Once contact has then been established, the communication often becomes addictive for the victim. His presence has an aura of malevolence that is felt as strong as wind can be, Darren said. And people have reported feeling as though he has invaded their dreams. A dream may be going along pleasantly at first, until a black figure appears out of nowhere. Sometimes the individual will wake up quickly, and they feel as though if they don't, they may end up engaged in a mental battle with this entity. Other spirits who communicate on the board flee in the face of Zozo. They spell out messages that he is coming, or that they are afraid of him, and then they cease communicating and leave in haste. Some reports from board users claim that he is actually materialised in the room after being initially contacted through a board. And his materialisation as a shadow figure dates to the early 90s, said Darren. Other reports also describe it as having legs shaped like a locust with bulging muscles, wings and scales on its skin. People have claimed that it has serpentine qualities, with the ability to shapeshift into anything it wishes. One young lady I've talked with says it often appears as a dog with red eyes guarding her property. And she says it came through to her and told her she is among the chosen 2012 trio, whatever that is. To this day, Darren continues to monitor the phenomenon, which has grown far bigger than he ever expected. Most alarming is the evidence that Zozo has spread its tentacles far and wide under a host of aliases, usually all starting with a Z. On my site I warn people that if they experience strange names such as Zozo, Zaza, Zoso, Zoz, Zaz, Zoha, to be extra careful. I've always suspected that these entities are part of a demonic legion of sorts, and a haunting can occur as a result of communicating with any of these entities, Darren said. I warn people to be on guard when conversing with any spirit through the board. And I realise people are going to use the board regardless, but I do feel a responsibility to warn them about what can happen. Home invasion, attachment, mental instability, and more. It is a harmful master of deception. And my best advice that if you run across this entity on a board, properly close the session, politely dismiss all the spirits, and then refrain from attempting to contact them or engage with them ever again. I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Let me know which part of the story you found the scariest in the comments. And remember, be safe if you use a board. And I'll see you next time on From Beyond.